welcome back to Diskogs Presents. This week we will discuss David Bowie's Earthling, as well as
HIPPOPOTAMOMUS by Momus.
here's the David Bowie album, and we'll bring up a picture of the Momus one.
It's kind of obscure.
Alright, so let's get started with Momus.
Can we start with David Bowie?
If you want, we'll start with the mainstream, into the obscure
That makes more sense.
afterwards. Okay. David Bowie is one of my favorite artists of all time. What I love about him is his ability to adopt different styles of music and personas that are pretty different, but they're all David Bowie. And, everyone loves David Bowie. That is also why a lot of people don't like David Bowie, is because he keeps changing things up and won't stick to what works. And this is not a massively popular album with most of his fans. People like Greatest Hits, Ziggy Stardust, Berlin Trilogy, maybe the 80s album,
Let's Dance?
the Let's Dance album. In the mid-80s, David Bowie had a career low, and after that he kind of didn't know what to do with himself, and he formed a new band called The Tin Machine with not very well-known guitarist and a couple of brothers. He did that for a few years. No one really liked it. But then he started making weird albums. For me, I feel like Earthling is the first one of these weird albums that succeeds in being good. The vision is there. It's got a lot of contemporary influences from the time, such as drum and bass, jungle music, shoegaze. Yeah, this is a great album. I love how it's only 9 songs. I love the artwork. He's bleached his hair orange, and he's wearing an Alexander McQueen designed Union Jack jacket, and he's standing in front of a very Microsoft Windows-like background, probably of England. It's got a really interesting graphics here. It's really hard to read the song names because the size of the text is big and then small. The numbers are also changing in size, but it's really cool. And then the back is just the Windows background. The one thing I don't like about having this on record is it's a double album. However, fourth side, it just has this weird design on it. You can't play this on your record player, and it's just a huge disappointment. It's like a waste of space, but at least he's doing something with it.
Sorry, what year did this album come out? Is it the 90s? Yeah, peak CD era. People had completely lost faith in vinyl records. David Bowie probably didn't even think about how many sides of a vinyl record that it would fit. They might not have even done a first run on vinyl, I don't know. Yeah, David Bowie, Earthling. I really like this album too. And it's funny that it is seen as an odd stepchild of the David Bowie discography. Really, it isn't that odd. The oddest thing about it is how much it embraces certain musical trends of the time. The parts of the album that don't work are the parts that sound just like drum and bass or just like industrial music. Those parts sound more dated, and the parts that work are when it sounds like he's synthesizing all of those elements into a new David Bowie thing. Because I think there are a couple of moments when it's just the Tin Machine guitar guy blaring away that I'm like, this really sounds 1990s. But then a couple measures later, this weird eerie piano or a weird synth part comes in, and it complicates what was originally just a sort of straightforward guitar riff, and it makes it start to work for me again. But it's not a short album by any means. I don't think any of them is under 4 minutes, and a lot of them are over 6. I think they work with varying degrees of success at sustaining their length. The first track, Little Wonder.
Talk about Little Wonder. This is one of the best and worst songs on the album. I first heard it on the Ricky Gervais show Extras. David Bowie guest appearances on. He plays it on the piano, just him singing with the piano, and it sounds great. It's a really solid song. It sounds crazy on this album. When it gets to the chorus really stinks, and it's a shame that it stinks so much.
I also agree that the chorus is pretty weak. I love how soft his little wonder part is, and in contrast with the musical chaos all around it. David Bowie is like this core of serenity, but the song really goes on for a long time, and it just doesn't develop to anything satisfying. It's kind of too early in the album to climax that big. Almost every song goes really, really hard. 7 Years in Tibet leans back a little bit, and I think that song is all the better for that. I would say 7 Years in Tibet and The Last Thing You Should Do, those are probably my favorite tracks on the album, and I think they're kind of the most slow and sensitive ones, as opposed to some of the other ones that blare right out of the gate. I love I'm Afraid of Americans too. It doesn't really develop. It's a super strong chorus, and that little bloopy synth line in the verse, I love where it sits in the mix. You know what I'm talking about? Like, you could almost miss it, but it's like this little, the boop, 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 boop.
That was my least favorite song. It's the most Nine Inch Nails like song, and I think that the album's best when it's doing drum and bass. Conceptually, as an album, it is true to David Bowie's whole identity as an alien, which he's kind of been riffing on since he started with Ziggy Stardust, Man Who Fell to Earth. Got a lot of songs about space. He kind of brings it back home to his alien background here, and I'm Afraid of Americans really exemplifies that. Of course, if you were an extraterrestrial, you land in America, you're fucked. It's just a good song with the background knowledge.
You would think an alien coming from space would be bringing something completely unique and unheard of. But in reality, what he's doing is actually grabbing from other things and just putting them together in a unique combination. I'll take this little beat. I'll take this guitar sound.
All in all, it's a terrific album. I love the cover. I would give it a solid 9 out of 10.
So we're sticking to ratings. We're doing ratings for sure. Yeah. Okay. 7.9. It's really great. It's not in my top 5 Bowie albums, but when I put it on, I don't want to turn it off. I want to listen to the whole thing.
Let's get into...
This is a weird album that you may not have heard of. The man is Momus, a Scottish songwriter named Nick Curry.
When I chose this album for review, the David Bowie one, you very quickly picked the Momus album, and I listened to the Momus album, and I'm very curious what the similarities are, in your opinion, because I didn't really see any.
Yeah, well, one reason why you might not have picked up on the similarities is that you only listened to this one Momus album. And part of the reason they're so similar is that Momus has also been a huge genre chameleon over the decades. They both started off with a much more sort of psych folk acoustic guitar sound, moved into dancier music with samples in the 90s. I would say they're connected by having androgynous...
I'm gonna turn the light on.
Oh sure, it's getting a little dim. They both like to play with gender bending. They have a lot of songs with sexual themes. Are these enough similarities for you? They're pretty similar. But yeah, Momus is kind of like, he's evil in a way. There's something evil and perverted about his music. It's not my favorite Momus album, HIPPOPOTAMOMUS, but I picked it because it's the most evil one. And it's quite an uncomfortable listen, and that's why I love it. There's almost no other album that makes me feel quite as uncomfortable as this one.
I mean, that's interesting and very telling, because you didn't tell me that. I thought you really liked this album. I really didn't enjoy listening to it for these reasons. But please, go on.
Well, I should be clear. I love this album. I really, really love this album, but it makes me very uncomfortable. The title song is from the perspective of a hippopotamus who gets engulfed in volcanic ash in the middle of having sex with another hippo, and then he's like preserved forever in a natural history museum. There's little children going up to the window, like gawking at my body having sex, and he's sort of like, this is you too. There's almost an accusatory finger of this album that's saying like, I'm digging in here to look at all these perverse things, but I assure you that you are just as perverted as me. And in a sense that like, I sort of view it thematically as like the record is the momentary, the freeze frame of the sex, in the same way that like the petrified hippo, like the petrified hippo is the record. Does that make sense? Anyway, this album has a lot of samples and is kind of weirdly dancey, but it never makes you want to dance because vocally Momus is so creepy and whispery, like an old man peering over your shoulder in the middle of a park, whispering insane thoughts to you. You have the second track, I Ate a Girl Right Up. The title's pretty self-explanatory. A dull documentary about having sex with a babysitter while a little girl is in the other room nearby.
Yeah, I mean, all the songs are very sexual and creepy. I'm glad you said that, because in the Doll documentary, he mentions being on the fire escape, looking at the babysitter, very aroused, and yeah, I really got the feeling that Momus is that kind of guy that stands on fire escapes and looks into windows. I really didn't like this album. I liked the cover with the Michelin hippo. That was nice. But yeah, I wouldn't really recommend anyone listen to this. I did a little reading about it. I saw that Jarvis Cocker of Pulp was quite a big fan of Momus, and that really makes sense. Jarvis Cocker is similarly intrigued by sex, and he kind of whispers his vocals, but Jarvis Cocker does it like really well. The other thing with Momus's album is it feels like he made it all on his own in his room. It's really off-putting, and while Jarvis Cocker might have some of that in Pulp's music, I do feel like having a whole band decreeps it a lot.
When I say I love this album, it's not purely for shock value. The reason I love it is because I think it evokes real desperate emotion. A large part of that is his vocal delivery. He modulates between parts that seem casually spoken, like storytelling, then he'll slip into a melody. And it's like the transition between the spoken part and the melody is so seamless, you barely even notice it's there. But then the melody that he sings is so like heartbreakingly beautiful. And most of the time, that beautiful melody comes directly after he said something horrible. And the contrast between the two, I curse you, but then also can't you see how soft and beautiful I am? I should say Momus's other music is not all concerned with sexual perversion, and that this is very much a concept album. Don't be turned off of Momus entirely, because he has quite a broad body of work with other themes.
Sure. Yeah. This album was famously given a 0 out of 10 by one reviewer. I'm not going to give it a 0 because I do think it's brave to make something if you're an artist, so I'll give it a 1 out of 10. I listened to it twice. I don't think I will again. Too unlistenable for me.
Well, I'm not surprised by that opinion. This album is an acquired taste. This album is like an 8.5. I listen to it a lot. It's definitely not my favorite Momus album. That would be Tender Pervert. If you are tentatively interested, try out the track Blue Stocking. It's the least offensive, the most outwardly pleasant. It has a nice sample of the Zombies on it. I would put that on a playlist for a friend. I don't know.
All right, so that's episode 4 of Diskogs Presents. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next week.